Hello everybody, Christian from Treasure Town here, and today we're going to be speaking all about edge and foldover strike errors. These often occur because a planchet is upright when the dies strike and then the coin or the planchet folds over, creating a dramatic and rare error. There's a lot to learn. I'm bringing on error dealer and collector Travis, and we're going to go over it in a Zoom presentation from the values to how they're formed and a lot of the small anecdotes that only somebody who's been doing it for decades would know. So let's get right into the presentation. All right, so we are here with Travis. Thanks for being a part of this and explaining the edge and foldover strikes. Originally, I was just going to talk about foldover strikes. You introduced me to the concept of edge strikes, so that will be the first two coins we focus on. Just to review, how would you describe these coins as occurring?
All right. Well, these are pretty easy. As the planchet gets fed into the press, in certain circumstances, it's very rare. It will get kicked up on its edge. Some people think it could even be spinning, which would make sense that it's, staying upright. And the dies come down, and in the case of an edge strike, they contact the edges. Usually the planchet bends and then it gets ejected out of the press at that point, just from the pressure. If it doesn't get ejected, then it will fold over and be fully struck. And that's how we get a foldover strike.
Cool. So here's our first example. Like I said, we just have two, but we see a little bit of an edge strike here. Looks like on either end over here, and then also potentially a little bit over there, or is it mostly just on the?
Yeah, that side, and then you're seeing the bend in between. So this is a great example of it bending and then got ejected out, and then somehow for the second strike ended up under a set of dies again and getting struck off center 80% or so.
Now, are these edge strikes, when I was looking for them, seem slightly rarer than the foldover? The prices don't reflect that because I would say it's probably more visually appealing to have a foldover strike. But what is the difference, would you say, price wise and collector wise in terms of interest in the two?
It's an interesting point that you make, because that is true that edge strikes, at least in my experience, seem to be a little rarer than foldovers. They're both rare, but yeah, the foldovers definitely have a lot more collector interest, and the price between an edge strike versus a foldover, with everything else being equal, say with the same date, if you know what it is, same denomination, you're looking at 3 to 4 times higher price for a foldover than an edge strike. And I think it is just because they're so dramatic versus an edge strike, which is often hard. Like in this picture here, you can't even really see where it got struck. And even when you can, there's very little, design elements to be seen.
Makes sense. We just have one more here. I think this is neat because it looks like there's a bit of a divot and it's maybe a little more apparent. Obviously, since it's we can't see the edge, the holder isn't designed for that, but you can see it slightly more here. Is it common that the off center is always going to occur? And is that from it falling down and then getting struck again, or how does the
it could be falling down, or it could be a press with more than one set of dies and it scoots over to the next set of dies. I'd say, generally speaking, when I've seen an edge strike, it often does have a corresponding off center strike with it.
Okay.
I don't know if I'd put a percentage on how many have it, but it's not uncommon.
Good to note. And here we see, again, a much higher price for the nickel and probably as larger denominations. One thing you may have mentioned just as a hypothesis that we're going to see mostly smaller denominations. I think there's a quarter we'll talk about, but that does seem to happen most on pennies or not super large coins, potentially because of the space between the dies. Do you think that's a thing, and maybe it's tougher for the quarter to keep spinning versus a penny, which is smaller, or is it a function of the pennies having higher mintages?
I think probably a combination of everything that you just said. Definitely the Lincolns come out more just because they make so many of them. And yeah, I don't know if I have read this or this is something, I just thought up myself. I just don't recall now, but yeah, that the higher the denomination is, the spacing between the dies before they come down to strike actually wide enough for a planchet to sit upright. That said, though, I want to say that I have heard of the existence of a Kennedy $half foldover, but I've never seen it.
Okay.
But I've heard a rumor of one.
That's
Do you know
cool to
about
have
this?
you. I wouldn't know any of the rumors in the error
Yeah.
community. So that's thanks for
Yeah.
sharing. This one's a really appealing in my opinion, especially with some of that toning on the reverse. But sort of, is this a classic foldover strike example, or
I
how
would
would you view this
say,
coin?
yeah, definitely. This one's a nice one just because you can definitely see the point at which it folded. And I really like that look that this cent has.
Yeah, it's got a little bit of a taco shape,
Yeah.
and it's potentially one thing you mentioned that I wasn't aware of is the clock set. Though I'd imagine a foldover clock set would be much tougher to assemble, where you've
Yeah.
got this would be the 12 o'clock, I guess, and then you could go
This
around
would
the.
be a six.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah. But yeah, I did once upon a time see a clock set of foldovers where the design, went off center to a certain clock position, and they had all 12 represented. It was a really nice set. This was at least a decade ago, so I don't know what happened to the set. Hopefully, it's still intact.
Yeah, no, that sounds like it would be challenging to build, but sort of fun to show the depth of the error hobby. This one has a date on the coin, potentially would make it a little bit more valuable, though the price seems a little bit lower, and could certainly work its way nicely into another one of those clock sets. How do you view this, and
Yeah.
do you have a guess as to why it sold for less?
I don't really. I mean, it's kind of got some discoloration on the planchet where the zinc is exposed, but it's a nice example with the date. So that would be at that 690 price, in my opinion, a pretty good deal to somebody.
And the next one we have is possibly one of the most expensive foldovers I was able to find. This one's just a 1965 Jefferson nickel, 4,310, and maybe a little less conventional of a foldover. How would you look at this one?
Yeah, it's a little different looking, just because the fold isn't quite as obvious as other foldovers, although you can see it there where your cursor is pointed at about 8:30, 9 o'clock, and then opposite over at about 4 o'clock there. I don't really have an explanation on why this fetched such a nice price. It is a nice example
Do you
being
think
fully dated.
one question, maybe is this just an example of the foldover strike, how in certain types of errors there's so few of them available, especially with maybe a rare denomination where it's just two people who really
Yeah,
want to own the coin?
it could be. Yep. A
Have
couple
you ever?
people that needed or wanted a fold over nickel, and something. These are foldovers are extremely scarce. So if you're looking for one and have the opportunity to buy one, this could be one of those situations where it's either, you snooze, you lose.
Yeah. As we move on to the next one, are there any sort of crazy stories that involve what you're talking about, where you've seen something bid way up within the error community, or not really?
Definitely. Yeah, there's times where it, you think something is likely going to sell for X price and it sells for 2 or 3 times that amount. I guess I don't really have a specific anecdotal story I can think of off the top of my head, but sometimes things fall through the cracks, and other times, yeah, things fetch good money, and yeah, sometimes
What
it's
about
one of
this?
those things.
This one sort of has the nice, what you were saying, taco, and it's silver, which I think would add to my interest in the coin. But the dime, also not a denomination we see too much. $3,800.
Yeah, this is a very nice piece. The price, in my opinion, is slightly on the strong side, but it is a very eye appealing example, and silver. So being that it's silver makes it more desirable.
One thing we talked about, the full bands designation on the on the torch there. Does that different with foldovers? It might be more likely to happen, or is it just with other types of errors?
Yeah, it is more likely to happen, just because you've got basically double the planchet thickness there due to the foldover underneath the dies. So it has much more of a chance to, really get those design details to strike up. So this is true of other error types where, with Jefferson nickels, you could have nice full steps, these dimes with the full bands, etc.
No, thanks for clarifying that.
Yeah.
Right here, a lot of zinc showing through on this one. That's why I included it in the presentation as something different. What is that more desirable to error collectors, or how does this happen? Sometimes you don't see the zinc coming through.
I'm just speaking from my own personal opinion. I don't really gauge desirability based on how much zinc is showing. Like in the case of this coin, if it had less showing or more, it probably wouldn't affect the way I think about it.
Mhm.
Although I do like the effect, especially if you're looking at the word America, where the copper kind of streaks and you can see the nice metal flow lines.
Yeah.
I think that makes it look really cool. One of the drawbacks to exposed zinc can be over time where it can discolor and even
Mm.
turn black in some cases.
And
Something to think about.
yeah, that's a good point that I hadn't really thought through. Does it matter what condition? Like if this was a mint state 64 red, say, or brown, at that point, is it a red brown less desirable coin? Is it going to get cut in half on the value?
Um,
Or if it was
I think
67?
I think if it was 67, 65, the price would still be about the same. I think that if the grade was starting to fall and it was due to, really un- unappealing qualities, say that it's got, some carbon spots or a little scratch, that could definitely make the price go down. This is, this one here is a great example of a 66, nothing detracting about it. So I'm sure that probably helped with the price. I mean, it's a really nice example, this particular coin.
Cool. After that, we've got, and I think we have maybe one or two more after this, but this undated Jefferson nickel still holds up relatively strong price wise. Really like the appeal and sort of the flow out in the lettering. And as you were saying, has the full steps clearly displayed. But is this, it looks a little bit different in terms of its presentation. Maybe there's less of the folding over effect. And I'm curious what's going on here on the left part of the reverse, but I really like this
Yeah,
coin.
it really looks like after it folded, it was obviously struck out of the collar and it expanded a fair amount for a foldover. And that might be part of its appeal, because it is kind of a little more unusual looking as foldovers go.
And then this, I think, is going to be our last one, this Connecticut Statehood quarter. Just really, really cool. My home state. I'd love to own this, but the value, I think it's the highest price that we have today. And I don't know if you have any comments or anything about this.
It is a great coin. I have seen it before. I think the price is very reasonable. I'm not aware of another foldover statehood quarter, although certainly, they could exist, but I don't recall seeing another one besides this Connecticut.
Awesome. And yeah, just a little tidbit you'd mentioned in a previous video, 1999 going to be the common date to get crazy mint errors with maybe the Y2K going on, a little less oversight, and the start of the statehood program. So maybe standards were slightly lower and we see a little more common. How do you think if this was from, say, New Mexico, would it double in price, or how would it react?
It would be easily double. So any state quarter, really any coin, especially a foldover, dated 2002 to today, would be worth a significant amount more than the examples that we've looked at. Actually, I need to look into this, but I wonder if a foldover is even possible on the new presses that they have, and I believe that they're not.
Okay.
But don't quote me on that.
Yeah, no, thanks for thinking through all of these with us though. And we should do a video sometime on the different, who's collecting it at the higher end, or how there's competition, or who's buying up the really big stuff. But fun to think about,
Yeah.
and great to learn a little more about these edge and foldover strikes.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. These are definitely one of my favorite error types.
Thanks for watching the video. I'd encourage you to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel to stay updated. I've also got Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, so you can follow me there. TreasuretownYT.com is the main channel website. Definitely give that a visit. I've got a lot of information about me up there and the channel. CoinGrabBag.com as well currently redirects there, but it's some good opportunities for very fair grab bags, both made by me and other sellers. A lot of different options, so that's a good way to support. There's also TreasuretownCoins.com. In the future, my coin dealing operation will be done out of that website. CoinMeltPrice.com for updates on the melt prices of your coins, both US and world. A lot of resources in that website. And then CoinsMetalsCards.com, being developed right now as a marketplace and news source for coins, metals, cards, and collectibles in general. So I'll see you on my future videos. Looking forward to seeing you there, and hope you have a good day.